people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. 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 That's the bad guy.
De la noche, Stephanie Piñeiro.
That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this, a recent social media post from Fight Hype's Twitter account that reads, Floyd Mayweather is not facing Mikey Garcia in an exhibition fight. Y'all should probably stop paying attention to whoever, quote-unquote, reported that. We talked about that rumor here on the channel, the possibility of such a fight, such an exhibition, and what it might do commercially. It's supposed to be happening the same night as Haney versus Prograis, whatever it is Floyd is doing.
With or without Mikey.
Rumor has it it's supposed to be a pay-per-view, if it does happen. Danny Garcia and Keith Thurman are supposed to be making separate appearances on the undercard. Doesn't matter anyway, I had no plans on purchasing it. I'm gonna buy the Haney versus Prograis fight, the super lightweight title fight, happening that same day on the DAZN platform.
Floyd has had several exhibition matches off-platform. You know, the one with his old sparring partner, Don Moore, the one with Deji, that was actually on DAZN.
The other one with that kickboxer in Japan, the one in the UK with Chalmers, and the more recent one with Gotti, John Gotti, or one of John Gotti's kids or grandkids, I forget who it was. The last time that Floyd Mayweather did anything on the Showtime platform was the Logan Paul exhibition, well over a year ago. So he's returning to the platform, and I think the reason for it is they're trying to use what celebrity he still has or still might have to get some of these other guys out there, get some of these other guys that don't really have that much drawing power, a fight date.
But how much drawing power does Floyd have these days? How much really? They said the Logan Paul exhibition did somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 million pay-per-view buys, but Logan Paul is actually very, very popular. Millions upon millions of subscribers and followers on his social media.
If that thing really did do 1 million pay-per-view buys, I hardly think that most of that million were boxing fans that are in the market for a boxing match. That wasn't a boxing match. It was an exhibition. I'd sooner believe that it was Logan's fans primarily that purchased that thing, because there was nothing on there for a boxing fan, a true blue fight fan. And you know, the exhibition with Deji, the exhibition with Don Moore, the one with Chalmers, and the more recent one with Gotti, those weren't reported to have done those kinds of buys. So once again, I'd sooner believe that Logan sold that fight more than Mayweather. That's saying that if you put him out there in December, the same night as Haney versus Prograis, you better get him a decent dance partner, because he by himself.
It's not 10 years ago, 10 or 15 years ago. He ain't got the Midas touch.
Not everything he touches turns into gold. Hell, even in his prime. The misconception with Floyd is that because Floyd won those fights way back when he was an active boxer, the misconception is that because Floyd won those fights, that he sold those fights by himself, that he was the only driving force for the numbers. Floyd relied on the other guy's audience to help make the numbers.
Don't misunderstand me. The name of Floyd Mayweather is the common denominator in what are some of the biggest numbers the sport has ever seen. It is, but the disconnect is that he did it all by himself. No, he didn't.
You fight a Juan Manuel Marquez, well, some of those fans are Marquez fans. You fight a Cotto, some of those fans are Cotto fans. A Canelo, a Pacquiao, a McGregor.
Of course, there are people that are paying to see Floyd, but there are people that are paying to see them too. And if you take away a fighter with that kind of an audience, if you take that fighter away, the numbers look more like the Berto numbers.
Numbers that by today's standards wouldn't have been that bad, but way back when, that was low for Floyd Mayweather, the numbers for the Berto fight.
They weren't as big. as Floyd's other numbers for Floyd's other fights because he wasn't fighting a fighter that was as popular and followed as those fighters were.
And I think we've been seeing that in the years that followed his retirement. Of course you can put up big numbers with a big name like a McGregor, and of course you can put up big numbers with a social media influencer like a Logan Paul, but with these other guys, the numbers are not that big. The numbers are not the same. In some instances, they're not even reported. And the feeling is that if you had something to brag about, you'd be bragging about it. So if you're not bragging about how big the numbers were, it's because of how big the numbers weren't.
What kind of numbers he can put up in December, if he ends up fighting in December, are contingent upon who he fights, because he by himself doesn't have the Midas touch.
What would be his return to the Showtime platform after having boxed off platform for some time, likely to get these guys a fight date, get these guys one last payday before Showtime bows out from the sport of boxing. I think you can expect to see a lot of guys boxing on that undercard, as many as they can fit, piggybacking off of Floyd's celebrity, or what remains of it, his drawing power to get them one last fight date, one last payday before it's curtains at Showtime.
The marketability of the show all depends on who Floyd fights. You need a worthy dance partner. If it's your intention to avert the gaze, avert the eyes of the boxing community at large onto your fight instead of the one happening on DAZN,
Well, I don't think the Don Charleses or any of John Gotti's grandchildren, I just don't think that's going to cut it. We'll see what happens. As it pertains to the PBC, boxing insider Rick Glacier said, "From my entertainment attorney friend that gives me those spot-on pay-per-view numbers since 2004, the entire United States TV industry knows Al Haymon and PBC are soiled brands and sliding yearly. Haymon no longer will get a TV or streaming deal that actually pays a guarantee. He may get a distribution deal with no financial guarantees, but that's an at-best scenario." There you have it. Could this be the end of the PBC as we know it? What Rick just described was an at best scenario. At worst, what are we looking at? The doomsday scenario, the one I told you about last year. If Al Haymon cannot find a broadcast partner and he's left harboring a stable of refugees, he's gonna have to outsource them. Another quote from my TV attorney friend on the latest in relation to Haymon securing a TV streaming boxing deal. Haymon has nothing concrete, and what he's got isn't good. There's no money attached to anything for Haymon, especially with his poor reputation nowadays. He should realize that by now. There you have it. He's burnt too many bridges, been on too many networks, and failed to deliver, which could leave all of us seeing the doomsday scenario, the one I described late last year, but haven't spent too much time on this year, because Showtime leaving the sport of boxing, the end of Showtime boxing, doesn't mean the end of the PBC. Not necessarily. If they can get a broadcast partner, they're still in the race. They're still in the game, though what Rick is describing,
it's not that.
That many failures across that many networks, across that many broadcasters over that amount of time, it's no less than I expect. And if he can't get a broadcaster, what then happens is Haymon is reduced to a booking agent, outsourcing his fighters to whoever can use them for a fee that he will collect.
In the absence of a broadcaster, that's what he would be reduced to. We don't know exactly what's in those contracts, what's in the fine print.
And we are already getting a first look at the civil unrest within the PBC, their stable. Former unified super bantamweight champion Stephen Fulton took to his social media and said, "I have no news or update on my next fight for those who are asking. All I can do is wait like y'all." It's the fighters like Stephen Fulton that you have to consider, that you have to keep in mind. When we talk about what Haymon has to work with, what his bargaining chips are, the names of Canelo Alvarez and Gervonta Davis almost immediately pop up. But what about all those other guys, all those other fighters? How long do you think they're going to wait for Al to sort things out with a broadcaster? And if it ends up taking weeks and maybe months into the following year, how long do you think it'll be before those fighters start to get antsy, start to get angry, start to drift away to other platforms with other promoters who can use them, who can give them fight dates? Some assured assurances that they will work.
You know that the people at TGB, which is just another way of saying PBC, they've reserved 2 fight dates in Las Vegas in the month of February next year. But you gotta figure those 2 fight dates, that might be the Crawford versus Spence rematch and maybe Gervonta Davis's next fight. High priority fights.
What about all those other guys? What about all of those other fighters? You have to figure that if Al Haymon still has actionable contracts with some of these guys, he may outsource them for a nominal fee to a promoter that can use them. And if nothing else, the fighters themselves might start reaching out to a Matchroom, reaching out to a Top Rank, reaching out to a Golden Boy for the kind of assurances that Al Haymon cannot provide them at this time. And based on what their autonomy is, or isn't, they might leave him. They might jump ship. Because what good is Al Haymon in that scenario? What's supposed to be a major promotional outfit with many, many fighters in the absence of a broadcast partner? What the hell can Al Haymon be for those guys except the middleman reaching his hand in their cookie jar? Situation before was different. Al Haymon strikes a deal with a broadcaster gives him money to do fights throughout the year. That money goes towards the fighters' purses. But in the absence of a broadcaster, everything changes. You're talking about guys that are expecting to make in between 6 and 7 figures every time they get out there. So how much time do you think they're willing to give Al Haymon before he puts them to work? We don't know here and now if he can find a broadcaster.
What we do know is that these fighters have got mouths to feed, just like everybody else, just like me and you. And they can't just sit on the shelf waiting for Al to sort it out. That is, they can't sit there waiting forever.
They've got mouths to feed. They've got bills to pay, just like me and you. And if Al is still coming up short of answers several months into the following year,
we'll see what happens.
Давайте сфотографируем, типа face-to-face, там, реклама. Face-to-face? Да? Undisputed. Undisputed! When's it gonna happen? Is it gonna happen, guys, next year? When's it gonna happen, guys?
I don't know. He talk about fight, but he never fight.
Dmitry?
He looks like he fight, yeah?
this video footage was taken earlier today in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, as the only two light heavyweight champions shook hands and had a novel face-to-face with each other. There isn't a fight signed, but this could be the beginnings of one. The beginnings of what could be Beterbiev versus Bivol. In previous instances, I've talked about how Top Rank's newly formed relationship with Turki Al-Sheikh and the good people over there in Saudi Arabia could lead to the undisputed light heavyweight title fight, because here in America, as good as that fight is to the hardcores, it won't generate but so much money. And the same is true in the United Kingdom or Canada, really anywhere in the world. Unfortunately,
this is a big fight to hardcore boxing fans, but not casuals. Casuals are not familiar with Dmitry Bivol or Artur Beterbiev. So the kind of money that the fighters would want to do the fight versus what the fight is worth commercially,
you can't make the numbers work. And they tried to earlier this year, but apparently both teams ended up walking away. Now, this video footage has given rise to some speculation that Dmitry Bivol is dragging his feet, that he seemed somewhat nervous when Artur Beterbiev put him on the spot. I don't read too much into that.
It just looks like he caught him off guard with what he said. Looks like he took him by surprise. Dmitry wasn't expecting that.
I don't blame anybody for thinking that Dmitry looked nervous in that situation. He looked more to me like he was caught off guard, but once again, I don't read too much into that. The bottom line is, you're gonna need serious money to get both guys in the ring. And because the fight only has but so much commercial value in other markets, it's hard to get the fighters that money, thus, it's hard to make the fight. But in Saudi Arabia, with the Saudis, who Top Rank are now working with, the people that are in attendance for this weekend's circus fight were called upon by name.
Many legends and familiar faces, champions, past and present.
When you see a Roberto Duran or a Miguel Cotto, an Amir Khan, or a Manny Pacquiao, you get why they're there, you get why they were called upon, but it's the active fighters that are in attendance that caught my attention. Dmitry Bivol in particular, as I've speculated in the past. Now that Bob is in bed with the Saudis, they can do business, and maybe they can do this fight.
I don't think Dmitry Bivol is there for no reason. I don't think they called upon him by accident. This is by design.
I think it is. Every one of those familiar faces you see in Riyadh this weekend, anyone from Michael Spinks the Jinx to Shannon the Cannon Briggs,
To Rampage Jackson, to Ronaldo, Cristiano Ronaldo, to Eminem.
their presence at this weekend's fight in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, it all lends itself to the decadence of the show, the decadence of the event. But some of these attendees, their attendance is more purposeful than some others. While some of these guys are there for decoration, some might be there on business. And I think Dmitry Bivol, he's there on business.
We know the Saudis want to put on big fights. They want to keep bringing big-time boxing to their region of the world. Well, this is the biggest light heavyweight fight you could make. It's the biggest fight you could hope to make, and they have the biggest money.
They can make it happen, and my feelings haven't changed. For years now, I speculated that it would take years to get Dmitry Bivol and Artur in the ring, and by the time they do get in the ring with each other, well, Artur, he's gonna be old.
He still has to take care of his mandatory challenger, former champion Callum Smith, early next year before he can move into a Dmitry Bivol fight.
And all of this is encouraging, all of it is, because it's either Callum Smith upsets the apple cart for Artur and takes all those belts back to Matchroom where he can then unify them with Dmitry Bivol, or Callum gets iced like everybody else has gotten iced. Artur stays champion, and maybe finally, he moves into negotiations with Dmitry
On the Saudis' dime, with the Saudis' help. I would imagine that in that situation, that would be a Top Rank show. Top Rank would be at the helm of promotion.
because Matchroom doesn't have much use for Dmitry Bivol at this time. He hasn't fought this entire calendar year. They don't have him doing much, and they don't have very many, if any, options for him. So I'm sure they'd be willing to send him over to Top Rank, where the fight would be distributed here in America via ESPN Plus and perhaps DAZN in other markets.
The UK and other territories.
And I still like Dmitry to win it, in spite of Dmitry seeming flabbergasted, a bit nervous, what seemed to me to be like a guy who was caught off guard. I still like him to win it because no matter what was said in the moment, Artur's getting older. He's an older, injury-prone fighter that doesn't fight that often. And those 39 or 40-year-old legs,
He's got power, buckets of power. He's got power till the cows come home, but his legs, it's gonna be hard for him to keep up with Dmitry.
who is the noticeably younger and fresher fighter with the fresher set of legs. His distance control, managing distance, that has a lot to do with that. He won't make himself a stationary target with Artur.
Though he's not just going to backpedal either. Think Zurdo Ramirez and what he did in the Ramirez fight. In and out, behind the jab.
In and out, on the balls of his feet, stepping in, putting punches together, 2 and 3, then getting out safely. I think he can out-hustle Artur Beterbiev, who's not getting any younger.
Or faster.
I still like Dmitry Bivol to win the fight if and when the fight happens, and I expect that it might in the second or third quarter of next year.